After going over the introduction to the book Third and a Mile, I want to go over some of the sociological concepts that I tied into the textbook. One of the big sociological concepts that I chose was the deviance in sports. Early on in the 1920s, all the way to the 1980s, the norm for an NFL quarterback was that they were smart, they were poised, they were a leader, all while running an NFL team. And discussed in the book, a norm is a shared expectation that people use to identify what is acceptable and unacceptable in the social world. So the norm in the NFL was that you had a white quarterback who were smart and who were running their team. The problem was that the quarterbacks in this book did not fit the norm of white NFL quarterbacks because they weren't seen as leaders even though they all had success in college. They were looked at as athletes instead because of their superior athleticism. Even though they had all the traits to succeed at the position, they struggled to get the chance because of what society deemed as a norm, which was being a white NFL quarterback. The next big sociological concept was media. Since African American quarterbacks were pretty much barred from playing quarterback in the NFL by owners, coaches, fans, and others due to the society, the quarterbacks you saw on TV majority of the time were white. The only time you saw black players were at other positions on the field, so quarterbacks coming into the NFL were already doomed to fail because of the lack of representation at the position. The book also pointed out how that's different from today and the progress that has been made, but there were still signs of discrimination. One being an example by Rush Limbaugh, an outspoken conservative, with his comments to Donovan McNabb. Rush Limbaugh stated that McNabb was overrated by the press simply because he was black. The media has been very desirous that a black quarterback does well. There is a little hope invested in McNabb, and he got a lot of credit of the performance of this team that he didn't deserve. At this point, McNabb was already a great quarterback. He led the Eagles to multiple NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. Yet he was subjected to this type of discrimination. The last sociological concept discussed in the book was race. Race obviously played a big factor in the book because of segregation early on in the civil rights movement. Blacks were looked at as inferior to whites, so there was no surprise that African American quarterbacks weren't given the same opportunity as whites because of the color of their skin. Whenever a black quarterback tried to make it in the NFL, the reason for their limited access was because the white owners, coaches, scouts thought they lacked the intelligence for the position. So because of this, most quarterbacks coming out of college were moved to other positions, including wide receivers. To stop this from happening, some even ran 40-yard dashes slower and dropped balls on purpose when doing receiver drills and able to stay at the position of quarterback. The book also talked about the position of quarterback in the NFL and how it represented power. Because the quarterback has control over the whole offense and was the one calling plays. So many people believe that whites did not want to give control over to blacks while also making them the face of the team. The sad part that was evident throughout the story was that even when they had much superior talent to their white counterparts, they were still not given the chance to start. About the sociological concepts that were evident throughout the book, I want to move on to the societal impact that the book Third and a Mile has had on society. Okay, so societal impact of Third and Mile was huge, not just for African Americans, but society as a whole. When you think of an NFL quarterback, some of the names you think of are Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Tyrod Taylor, and Dak Prescott. What do all these names have in common? They not only are in starting roles for the NFL team, but they're doing it successfully. Discussed in this book was the fact that was unheard of really during and before the 1980s. If black quarterbacks somehow made it to the league, they were entrenched as backups. But now you have players like Cam Newton and Russell Wilson competing for an MVP of the league. Players like Doug Williams, Marlon Briscoe, and Warren Moon really opened the door for African Americans as a whole. Because of segregation and civil rights, blacks were viewed as unequal to whites, especially when it came to characteristics like intellect and leadership. The knock on African American players and even people in society was that blacks weren't as smart as whites and didn't have what it takes to lead. Well, players like Doug Williams proved society wrong when he became the first African American to win the Super Bowl with the Redskins. That was a huge step because it solidified in the minds of every African American person that there is no limit, no barrier that can stop you if you work hard to achieve your goal, because of the colors your skin does not define you. In this chart below, you can see from 1932, there was less than 5 black quarterbacks in the NFL. In the 1940s, there weren't any that made one pass attempt at quarterback. And in the 2000s and 2010s, you have 18 quarterbacks who made at least one pass attempt at quarterback. That shows huge progress in how far African American quarterbacks have came since before the 1920s and 1930s. After looking at the chart, I want to go over some critical questions that I have for consideration. Some critical questions. How big of an impact does segregation and civil rights have? When evaluating talent, how much does race play a factor? And last, are there still signs of inequality and discrimination today? Answer the second question by going to this video.
Rob as one of the guys who, when you came into the league, despite the fact
you see a guy like Tim Tebow playing the game of football the way he does, he doesn't belong in the National Football League compared to how it's been for people like myself that had to actually play the slash role to get the respect in the game, whether it's taking short yards and goal line plays. That's why I mentioned that he needed to, get a package so he could become better as a quarterback.
which is what you did.
Which is what I did, because
Is it personal for you?
there's a little bit.
How did you not look seriously?
Warren Moon, someone who I talked to, coming out and asking how should I go about this, because they wanted me to play another position coming into the league.
What did he tell you?
Whether it's Chicago Bears or the Indianapolis Colts, they wanted me to play another position. He was like,
this video highlights some of the issues talked about. Is race really a factor when evaluating talent? The next question I want to get to, are there still signs of inequality and discrimination today? My point that I wanted to make with that today is that a lot of the problems today have to do with stereotypes. A lot of times that in the one article you can see here, is that black African American quarterbacks are still stereotyped as under some of the categories that were relevant early on. As you can see here, this is recruits coming out of high school in 2012. As you can see, all the pro-style quarterbacks on here are white. None of them are black. And then you look down here, majority of the dual threat quarterbacks are black. So my point is that even though the book Third and Mile shows that there has been a lot of progress made, it's still deep down some discrimination and inequality that exists towards the black NFL quarterback.